I kind of felt bad for it that you were the
I
only
was a
one.
pity party.
You're not a pity party. I just had it already.
11 years later, and I find out that I'm the pity party. Patty pat
You
pats.
already have it.
It's all making sense.
You were the pity
4 kids deep, 8 businesses deep. I should have been decapitated, is what they told me. And she broke up with me 3 times. No. Anyway. So,
You had a really bad
so she,
start,
what?
too.
Oh yeah.
Here,
Cross my-
forget.
You know what it is? Sponsored by Alani. This episode, whether they know it or not, sponsored by Booty Peach. Why? That's what we've been drinking. So if you like our podcast, get you some Alani, because you know it worked. If not, Alani, I'll give you my address. Go ahead and send it over. Anyway, welcome to the podcast.
Wait,
This is our first podcast.
What's our name of our podcast?
You gotta have a name, otherwise we're not legit. No one's gonna watch us again. Well, we got cookies. We got, but we're not just gonna talk about cookies. We're talking about some real stuff. And we're coming up with our podcast name right now with you, kids.
What about More Than Dough?
Are you serious? That's pretty dang good. Did you really just come up with that?
I did.
Welcome to the More Than Dope podcast with us, Patrick and Katie. We're really married, we're really business partners, and we're really not sponsored by Alani. But it's flowing, so it should be. Anyway,
All right, our More Than
welcome.
Dough
Yeah, it's More Than
podcast.
Dope podcast.
We got this.
Let's do it.
First podcast ever. I'm excited.
I mean, we've done a few.
What are we talking about?
We've done a few.
Yeah, a couple.
I mean, if you're not entertained, you really will be. And we've got some great stories for you. So, this is Alaska Katie. That's how I had her on my phone when I first met her. Now, AKA Crumble Katie.
Oh, wait.
But when I had you on
I
my
was
phone,
Katie Alaska
you were
in
Katie
his
Alaska.
phone. But what were you in my phone is a question.
Booty.
No, he wasn't that. You were Patty Pat.
Yeah, I told her, okay, so this is what happened.
Patty Pat.
I look at her phone, and it's like Patty Pat Pats. And I'm like, this is me? That's what you're calling me? I was like, no, you can't date a Patty Pat Pat. That's like automatic friend zone. You've got to change that name to like boyfriend Pat or something else. We're still kind of friends at this point.
We were friends.
But I didn't know where this would go. So when I first met you, it was like Katie. And I mean, you're the same way, right? You might not remember where you know this person. So I always have like something that reminds me. So you were Katie Alaska. That was like the
But people in
stereotype.
college called you Patty, so that's why you were Patty
Just my roommate.
in my phone.
Only my roommate.
And I had to
Because
spice
that's
it up
the
a bit
worst-
to Patty Pat.
It's the worst friend zone name. You're going on a date and the girl's like, Patty. And you're like, roll them up, Patty. Please. Patrick. Trick. So yeah, I made you when we started the day. I was like, all right,
You made
first item of business. No. I mean, I guess back then you could make, but now you can't. You can't say that anymore. So I highly influenced you to change my name when we started getting a little more,
Oh, that's
feeling it. Be like, yeah, first item of business. We're changing Patty Pat Pat's identity.
Yeah, but I don't think I changed it, even though you wanted me to.
It's because we met as friends, which actually was kind of
It's
the coolest
true.
part.
And so the love story began.
In Idaho, in a place called Rexburg.
And fun fact is, so it's my birthday today, March 19th.
Happy birthday.
We were married on March 23rd. It's going to be 11 years in a few days.
Don't have a wedding next to a birthday, because even though it sounds cute in the beginning, for the rest of your years, you will have to plan a double.
You got it though. You're good at it. Great.
Yeah, here we are podcasting on your birthday. So anyway, so we're in Idaho. You're up there.
Yeah.
You go from Alaska
Mhm.
to San Bernardino
California.
to then Idaho, which is freezing.
Mhm.
It's like an hour south of Yellowstone,
And now back to California.
California. So in Idaho, we started dating. Patty Pat Pats and Katie Alaska started dating.
And the first
And
time.
we dated for like a year and a half.
Well, no,
And she
no.
broke up with me 3 times.
Hey, slow down. The first time, my
But I
first,
deserved it. Now we're going to talk about boundaries.
and no, my first interaction with you though was over at our friend's house or friend's apartment, and you come busting through the door, and you're like, Patrick's here.
Listen,
and I'm sitting on the couch.
Well, it was my
And I'm
buddy's
like,
house.
who
I'm
is
not
this
like
guy?
we weren't going to visit the girls. Where we lived was like off campus, and then you had guys' apartments and girls' apartments were separated. So we're at the guys' apartments, and I'm like a couple doors down from my buddies, and so I'm just going to my buddies. So normal entrance to the buddies is like boom, kick the door down. Patty's here, and then here she is, like
No.
sitting on the couch, legs crossed. I'm like, oh,
Legs crossed.
hi, my name's Patrick.
Yeah.
Wasn't expecting that, but I guess it worked.
And then
4 kids later, it better work.
it's true, it did work. So then a couple weeks later, it was 4th of July.
Yeah.
Everyone bounced for their own, I don't know,
Yeah,
weekend celebration. They went
Yeah,
to
exactly.
Roy's. And we were still in Idaho or Rexburg together. And then we're like, all right, let's hang out.
Well, this was the coolest part, actually. So, like with dating, I think it's what I learned from Katie really is it's a couple of the little things that if you do those little things right, or you like identify them, and you can determine what's a red flag and what just needs a boundary. I think those are like one of the most important things that isn't taught in today's society that I thought you did extremely well. Because listen, like I was perceived as being wild and potentially bad boy,
Wait,
but my
perceived
actions
or were
were
you?
like, no.
Were you a little
I just like having parties, throwing parties, and having people enjoy.
But
and like
you
we
were,
didn't
like,
drink, so we're talking about parties.
Yeah.
This is non-drinking
in
parties.
college, yeah. So he
And so,
was the most
anyway.
sober party person there was in Rexburg.
Right.
But you were the one that threw all of the parties.
Yeah, so
you were
then-
the party guy.
But what I loved was this: is that when we hung out, you committed to come hang out with me and my buddies with your friends, right? But at
No,
that
no, no.
time, like there's different things.
No,
going
no,
on.
you guys came to us. We didn't be like going to you, be like, oh, we're
Well,
gonna
we're
go
like,
hang
hey,
out.
let's go to
We're
the
like, hey, we're going to the dunes, and then you're like, oh, us too.
because you brought the quads. We have quads at the dunes. You
There was
just
water there. We went
showed up. Okay.
Okay, so you came with us.
So you go for the water. We come for the quads. Another story at another time. I almost died like 2 days before actually this happened, and I think like that was part of our story too. That's how good this was, Anyway, so we're at the dunes. There's other things going on, but the dunes weren't as fun. These other people go to this place called Monkey Rock, right? It already sounds cool. It's like a waterfall. So a group of our friends were like, hey, we're going to bounce out and go
Of my
over here.
friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, all right, that's cool.
And I
Little personal.
was like,
I was like, get on the 4-wheeler and I'll take you to your car. And so, it's just college. People hop around. But what I'm saying is, one of the coolest things was, they're like, hey, do you coming? She's like, no, I'm going to stay here. And I was like, okay.
I'll stay with you, Buthang.
I was like, okay, all right. And that's what I mean. I think it's the little things to acknowledge while you're dating.
But what
when it comes to
about that? Why did
loyalty,
you? Yeah, but what about that?
commitment. Like you could have totally gone with your friends and it'd be fine. But it was really cool that you like had a hard decision to make. Your friends are going in a direction. There's peer pressure there, right? But you were alpha enough and confident enough in yourself to say like, no, I'll stay and I'll stick around. Like I kind of committed to this. I came with these guys, or at least that's how I viewed it. And like you could have totally gone, but it was just that like extra difference that was like, oh, wait a minute. Like she was confident enough to tell her friends, no, it's cool. I'll hang out here.
Hmm.
And then I was like, And I think what happens in dating is you try to find those moments. And if you got to identify them and place them as like, oh, okay, this represents loyalty, or this represents confidence, or this represents when things are hard, like not that this
Little
situation's hard.
markers, too,
Yeah.
like the person too.
Yeah.
That it was like, it was why like meaning I enjoyed being with what we were doing. So
Yeah.
there was no FOMO of maybe what they're gonna go do, and we're like, no, we're cool to just stay in this, even if it kind of
Even though it was chill.
plays out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know exactly. And she broke up with me 3 times. No, but that's part again of setting boundaries. And so anyway, we're dating. So that was the 4th of July. We end up leaving
We weren't
to go
dating.
watch Five.
We
No,
weren't
weren't
officially
dating.
dating. We were
That's what
just
it was. It
chilling.
was cool. And this one was a really good one actually.
4th of July.
Right before. So I told you, a couple of days before this, actually got in a quad accident with her roommate. And we're out in the same dunes area.
With my roommate.
And anyway, I got clotheslined by a wired fence. Like, you know how there's barbed wire fence, but then there's wire fence. It's like double wired. And they'd wired this area and it was like dusk. But in Rexburg, it was like 9:30 to 10 and it was dusk. Like it would get late.
Yeah, you couldn't
Sun
see
go
it.
down at like 10:30.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we finally made it. You know, the girls were like wanting us to go slow.
Oh,
We're in these
I wasn't
dunes. It's
there.
almost like Pismo. Yeah.
I stayed back to do homework like the good studious student that I was
And so
before.
it's true. I asked you to come, she's setting up. And
A few times actually.
and so anyway,
You threw that like two huge parties and I didn't go to them, and I honestly think that was one of the reasons why
I was tipped. So my brother-in-law always told me, you're gonna marry who breaks up with you. And I was like, this is dumb. Why is he saying that? But I think there's something about being able to work things out. And yeah, we throw different parties because that's what we did as my friends, like, you know, pool parties or stuff like that. I mean, with the DJ and everything, where it's like your friends and your circle is coming to this and you're like, don't show up. I was pretty ticked. I was like, why is this girl not showing up? And actually, one of those parties, tangent, I left and actually came to your apartment. Was like, what are you doing? What's going on?
It's all part of my plan.
Anyway, so back to the story. I get clotheslined. This was a miracle. I get clotheslined because I gun it when we get to the parking lot, and I'm like, dude, finally, I'm just gonna let this thing rip. Like these girls are making us go so slow on these dunes, and they're scared. Blah blah. So I'm just like, you know, we're in a parking lot, and then boom, and I'm like hanging on and trying to hold her, and there was two of them. So it was the first one, boom, and I didn't even see it. So I'm straight like, and then it dips down, and then we hit another one, and I'm like, holding, trying to pull it off, and they said I shouldn't be decapitated. I'm not exaggerating, even though that sounds like it's like that's a good intro to our podcast. I should have been decapitated, is what they told me. And she broke up with me 3 times. No. Anyway. So
You had a really
so
bad
she
scar,
what
too.
a oh yeah,
Here,
across
your
my
neck,
neck.
here.
Actually sometimes
Your armpit?
it kind of stayed. But because one of my armpits stayed, but that one was like anyway, so that happened like a couple of days before this to tee up what we were gonna say is when we were leaving. One of the coolest parts that I also like that like stuck out to me is now so we're out in these dunes and we're gonna 4-wheel back, right? And so a couple days earlier, similar scenario,
Oh, we're
your
going
roommate
back?
got hurt,
Okay,
and we're going back, and now you jumped on my quad.
well, okay, let's hold on. So Pat was, as he still is known for the crazy driver.
No,
Let's
no, no.
remember, yeah.
No.
So before
Organized European Italian driver that's
on the
always aware
Where
of
there's no-
your surroundings.
where there is no like lines, you're all over the place. So, which is okay, you
It's
know,
okay.
yeah. So we, after experiencing some of the girls on the back of your quad, they kind of like fled a little bit from your quad. And they're like, ah, I'm going with so and
Hey,
so.
I saved her life. She didn't die. She should have fell backwards, and
Yeah,
I
that's
held
true.
on. And I'm just
You were the angel in that scene.
the angel. Yeah.
So then I was like, you know, I kind of felt bad for it that you were the
I
only
was a
one.
pity party.
You're not a pity party. I just had already
11 years later, and I find out that I'm the pity party. Patty pat pats. It's all making sense.
You were the pity.
4 kids deep, 8 businesses deep, and I'm now still patty pat pats. Keep
You
going.
could view it as a pity party, or hey, there was already a natural love there. I was like, I gotta take care of him a little bit.
Aw,
Okay.
boo-boo.
So Boo Boo, I was like, oh no, I'll go with you. And I was like, I trust you.
That's what it was. So this still like brings a bell to me. So so 11 years on Saturday, will be 11 years, but this time period would have been 13 years. So she gets on the back, and I go, and I said something, and then I just distinctly remember her being like, "I trust you." And so I went slow and I went calm.
You went so
I took care of her.
slow. Where I was like, come on, speed this thing up.
It's like it still rings to me. She goes, "I trust you."
Isn't that creepy? But
Oh, it was. It was almost like, I don't know. What's Titanic? Is there a word in Titanic where she's like, I don't know. It's
yeah,
like one of
Jack,
those,
when
like-
she let him go in the water.
Yeah, this became a. So anyway, what I'm saying though is that like stuck out to me though. It was like, oh, wait a minute. That sounded different than, somebody else saying something like that. It like something in the energy. Now we're religious, so I believe it was a spirit. Like really hit me to be like, oh, that hit a little different. I trust you. And I was like, oh, because she's part of our friend group, right? So I didn't want to I knew I was looking for marriage. I was like 27 years old. So by that time I was already like, okay, I want to find somebody. And I was also like, how many relationships can you have when you're like a year, 2 years deep and then break up? Like I'm doing the math and I'm kind of like, I'm going to be an old grandpa.
Meaning there wouldn't be enough to be able to fully feel like and
yeah, like at that stage of my
who
life,
you'd want to
I did it enough that I was like, look, you get into these relationships, you care about people. I naturally care about people. And so the relationship ends up, the first 4 months of a relationship are like a screensaver. It's like everybody's putting on their best show. In reality, those first 4 months are just like, it's just like giddy fun.
Well, I always said too that I always wanted to marry my best friend. That's you, boo. Because, naturally, just you're more open, you're more yourself. And I felt like that's really how we started off too, is being like we started off as friends.
Yeah, because she was already in the group of friends. And that's what it was. I was like, okay, but I don't want to date somebody that then I mess up the like energy and the dynamic and the friend circle. But thanks to 4th of July, everybody bounced. Our circle got a little closer. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I always thought you were beautiful. But I was like, I didn't bring the girl into the group. She got brought in because somebody else. But now I'm like, well, I don't know. Nobody else is kind of like, what's up, girl? So, these little things of like, I trust you. She didn't leave us. And nothing in my past, like those things don't really resonate. Like we'd always have friends coming and going. It wasn't a big deal. But for whatever reason, like that day, like stuck out and then stuck out. And I was like, huh. And so, anyway, then we had to go pick up your friend, Brooke.
Yeah.
From the airport.
So we went to the airport to pick her up.
But you're in it for us now. You're already joining our Netflix movie of dating, so we've got to be detailed. Okay,
And
you got to hear this.
You got to remember.
Go to the gas station. You got to remember what.
Oh crap, that's not this.
Oh, that is good.
I thought you were gonna go like different when I went to the airport.
Oh, we can go in that, but we first went to the gas station before the airport.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, that way you're an OG listener. You got this deep into the podcast, you're gonna know us. We go to the gas station. When you go to the gas station, there's like those tubs of beef jerky, but the sticks, right? And then there's some that are like flat sticks. So it's like, I don't know, like 3 of your fingers maybe like this. And they've got a tub of them. And so on there, it says $1.99.
Okay, so my dad's a hunter. I'm from Alaska.
Katy, Alaska.
Okay, Katy, Alaska. My dad's a hunter from Alaska. He'd bring like every year moose meat home. He'd make moose jerky. So I'm used to like
and like
tubs.
fresh, like straight.
Yeah. So I'm used to like tubs and tubs of moose jerky. Okay. So when you go to California, I'm like, oh, they've got the tubs too. Okay.
But this was in Idaho, but it's okay.
Oh,
It's okay. So her experience in California led her to believe. So thank you, San Bernardino, for teaching Katy that jerky is in like individual form. So anyway, here we are. We just had this relationship at the, dunes. Like, I trust you. And so now here we are. I'm like, all right, cool. And so we're at the gas station. I like to get snacks and I'm a foodie. I end up realizing she's a foodie later too.
Mm-hmm.
You realize how much of a foodie, but so I'm like, yeah, get whatever you want. Let's get some stuff, and let's go pick up your friend at the airport. And there's a group of us, but her and I are like vibing. And so anyway, I'm like, I think I said, hey, do you like jerky? She's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, let's get some jerky.
Well,
And so
you're always the type too. Like whenever we went to gas stations, you still are like this. You're like, hey, like we're in munchie mode. Like let's go get munchies and go get a bunch of munchies. So
yeah,
you're always super like, hey, let me take care of the group. You go
yeah.
get this, you can get this. And I was like, don't have to tell me twice.
So I tell her to get some jerky. The lady, the cashier, while I'm there with like some of the stuff about to pay, the cashier looks and she's like, almost like there's a thief. Katie's like this. Just imagine it. It's actually this hand. She's holding the tub, like the whole tub of jerky, like this, in her arm, like this, and just she took a bite and she put it back in, twist the lid. And her back's to the door, like she's gonna go out. And I'm like, oh hey Katie, can you count those? She's like, why? I'm like, I gotta pay for them. She's like, yeah, it says $1.99. I said, yeah, but I gotta know how many are in the tub. She's like, yeah, $1.99. I'm like, I know. Per jerky, how many jerkies are in the tub that you're wanting to take home right now?
And then it clicked, and I was like, and I go in and
the whole store's looking at it. The cashier's
I
like,
grab my jerky back out, and I'm like, oh
that she
my
bit and put back.
I don't know what's worse, that I took it out and put the jar back, or that I just like.
And the lady's like, high rollers over here, huh? And she's like, you want the whole thing? No, we'll put it back.
And yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I thought the whole tub was like $2.99.
I loved it though. That was good. So we end up going to the airport.
Yeah.
That's when she realized that was crazy, I guess. But
hmm
she ended up telling her dad this part.
Yeah. So my friend, she's flying from California, and it's like a small airport. It's not a big airport. It's not like LA. It's not like Boston, and a huge airport. And I go in to go to the bathroom, and then all of a sudden I see Pat, I don't know, like 10 yards back. And okay, but mind you also we're in Idaho. So Idaho, like you can carry
Yeah.
firearms. Like, do
Yeah.
you even need anything? You don't need anything, right? Other
For the
than
sake of this, let's just say yeah, just in case I didn't have it. And then,
Again, back to Pat being in college was crazy. Okay. Um, so he was following me like 30 yards back, and then I look back and I see he's like carrying. You have your gun with you, right?
yeah, I mean, it's a normal thing. It's Idaho. Like you go shooting, you out, down 5 minutes and you go shooting out there. So it's like an activity versus like one of my buddies in California, he realized I had a gun. He's like, oh, you got beef with? What's going on? You got beef with?
Yeah.
But the culture though in Idaho is way different. It's like it's an activity. It's like I got a bike with me on my car because it's a bike.
Okay, but still, I'm walking through an airport and he's carrying a gun.
Okay, maybe not in the airport, just in case. I know
We can always cut this out. What's an airport? And I'm like, what are you doing?
Pre-TSA. I didn't go past TSA.
I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm protecting you.
No, come on. Are you kidding me?
Yes, you
There
are.
was no gun.
I
I used
swear
to have a
you
gun
were.
in the car. I just came and walked down. So you're like, hey, I'm going to go to the restroom. So you walk down. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to let her go on her own. So then you're like ahead a little bit. And
You had
and you
your
just looked at
holster
me.
and
No,
everything.
I didn't have a holster. So
Yeah,
that's
you
how I know
did.
this isn't true. So then you turn around and you're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, just making sure you're all right. And you like walk to the restaurant. I was like, yeah, just make sure you're all right. And then she thought it was weird. And what you said, like not protective. You said, how'd you feel?
No, like so then I called my dad, tell him, because he's not shy with guns. And he's like, yeah, he's either protective. I'm like, yeah, he said he's protecting me, but I'm like, so he's either protecting, or he's like, if not that, then he's crazy. And I said, and then now come to find out, you're a little bit of both, and that's okay.
We didn't talk about protecting. It was your dad said something to the
Yeah,
effect of
we
like,
did.
oh, he brought that idea to you. So there wasn't a gun. It's just that I followed you, and you're like, hey, he followed me to the restroom, and your dad said something like how, and you're like, no, he just came down and he stayed there and he sat down, And then your dad brought it to you that was like, oh yeah, he's just making sure that you're okay, do you think? And you're like, oh yeah, I guess. And that's when you start realizing like that's just natural for me to do stuff like that.
Yeah. And then you put your gun away when we got back to the car. I promise though, I remember a gun in the
Really?
scene. Yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't care you walking behind me. Like,
No, you did because you're like, why did you walk me to the restroom?
I don't know. All right, moving on. Maybe there was a gun, maybe there wasn't, but it could be mom and dad brain right now. So do what you will with it.
So anyway, that was our dating. That was kind of a summary of
Yeah.
our dating, I guess. It was like it was cool because you end up, when you end up dating somebody in the group, I think it is important as a guy to also distinguish. Like I remember that. I was like, okay, now I'm not trying to just be your friend. Because then we went to go see the fireworks and we're hanging out and the arm, my arm, I was just relaxing kind of like this and ended up kind of creeping behind her back maybe where she leaned back and it went off. And then after that, I think one of the important things is distinguish if you end up dating somebody, it's like a circle of friends or you're like, hey, how am I out of the friend zone or how do I get out of the friend zone? Just get out. You get out. Like I told her, I'm like, hey, I'm interested. I want to take you on a date and I want to go get some ice cream. And that's what it was. We're like, let's go test the waters. Let's go get some ice cream.
Yeah.
And so I think it's being forthright with it,
Because
Be straight up.
our conversation was really easy, but we're like, can
We're like,
it
we're in the
be more
group.
than that?
And she's probably like, he's patty pat pants.
You were still patty pats on my phone, so
Yeah, and you're still
we
kicking
we
Alaska.
had to feel it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's the tip there is like, just be open and forthright with your desires and your intentions versus like skirting around it and being like, oh, I'll never tell her. Wait till somebody gets married. We heard the story that like this girl got married and while she's getting married, looks at like this guy that's her best friend and they both look at each other like, and end up later on saying like, in that moment when they looked at each other, like, why didn't we tell each other that we loved each other? It really should be him. So as she's getting married, she's looking at the guy. He's looking at her. They've been best friends forever. And they're both looking at each other like, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me? And it should be him. And so I think that's what happens when you end up dating is like, there's this level of, I want to be taken care of. I want to laugh. I want to be, maybe sometimes with the bad boy. But I think it's also looking at, and I want romance. But I think as the guys, we got to straight up just know what we want. When you know what you want, lay out that intention. And yeah, you got to be vulnerable and it stinks. But dude, that's life, man. There's plenty of stuff you're going to get trampled on. The single best decision I made, and I said this to you last night, was marrying you.
Mm.
Because then everything else in my life genuinely works around that.
Mm.
Just like at another time, like I decided that my life revolves around Christ, revolves around God. And all the decisions I make revolve around that center. So that's my center. And then comes Kate. And that was something that I had to figure out and learn that was you. But because it is you, that's like another layer of protection that ends up bringing the right things or protecting the wrong things from being there. And when it comes to dating, that's the single most best decision you can make in your 20s or 30s, depending how old you are. But until you get to the next level, in my personal opinion and feelings, I don't care how far you get in your career, the single best decision is who your partner is going to be for the rest of your life, because that's going to dictate how you parent, how your kids are raised, if you have children or not. If you end up being, 60 with no kids, like Leonardo DiCaprio being like, am I still going to just get another 22-year-old and
But
keep doing this?
Some people are okay with that though.
Yeah.
Some people want to be.
That's true. But what I mean is like,
But it's also more so, thinking like life is just hard. So it's like, who's that person you're going to go through hard with and
Yeah.
how do they deal with hard and difficult and, traumatizing stuff, sad things, loss,
yeah.
disappointment.
Well, I mean, even career and business, right? Like I genuinely love and enjoy business. Like that's a passion of mine. And a lot of times you think, okay, you do that separate than with your partner, your spouse, your wife, or whatever, right? There's this life of like 8 to 10 hours that men have outside of the home in their career that actually doesn't really involve their spouse. Their spouse might hear bits and pieces of it, so they feel like, almost a TV series
Well, that's
that
how
kind of involved.
we were when we first were married.
Yeah, but it's really completely separate. And you go through, imagine like how many years of that, right? Where even me, who, like I said, career was a big part for me, making money, being a provider. But now, again, having picked the right person, like, and having you as that center, we've actually been able to, by keeping our own personal boundaries and desires, we said we wanted to spend more time together. We wanted to create that, right? The reality was when we first got married, we couldn't. But and working and having that focus, knowing what you want and building around it allows you to then get what you actually want. So back to talking about the original thing. If you're in the friend zone, how do you get out? Just clarify your intentions and what you want. If you're wanting to spend more time with your spouse, make those intentions clear, write it down. You might not get it right away, but you'll figure it out. And I think that's what we did is we ended up building a life where, and it doesn't work for everybody. We work together. We live together. Obviously, we're married. We raise children together. But I mean, we have all these different roles and characters that we have. And because we wanted to be together, we found a way to make that happen.
But I think it's also like we didn't know how to make it happen.
Not at all.
We
Not
just
at all.
naturally also just talked about it, thought about it. I was always wanted you home more. So I think it also naturally, when it came, on our path, it was much easier to jump on because we were already decided it in our minds.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Clear with your intentions, right? Like back to our dating, I could have totally been friend zoned. You'd be like, oh, he's just a fun guy. But I was like, no, I'm interested.
Yeah.
Let's go out for ice cream. And you're almost like, what? I think you did actually kind of say like, what are your intentions? Or you're like, what's the purpose? Like you came not really dressed up. You came in like sweats. You legit thought that this was just like a whatever kind of like, all right, I'm going to go. And I'm like, let's go out for ice cream. Let's even see if this thing works.
Yeah.
But we're straight up about it. And so I remember going to ice cream. We went to this frozen yogurt place. And she's just kind of like a little standoffish because now it's just me and you. Before it was in a group. And you're almost kind of like, so what's up? What do you want? You didn't say that, but your attitude was really like conversational too. It was kind of short, almost like, don't be flirting with me and schmoozing me and doing all this. Like, what do you want? And I loved it. And that's what I mean. That's the tip of like dating is like, just be straight up, be open. And if they don't reciprocate it, that's going to stink. But you want to waste your whole life having to fight for somebody? So when we started talking, we went straight into it. We talked about family, talked about goal, or I think our desires just in general, right? And so it was such a good combo and it was so natural that it was kind of like, okay, all right.
Well, it was also not wanting to like waste time. A lot of people at that age is just like I don't know, they just mess around, they flirt. It's a lot of just like self-centeredness for own like building up of confidence.
Yeah.
And I was just like, all right, well, either we're here to get to know each other and it's legit. Not that we gotta be serious and date and you have to propose, but that like you're gonna,
What are your intentions?
what are your intentions?
Be clear with your intentions.
Like either we're legit or we're not. And it's okay if we're not, but
And your time in your life to figure out. I mean, you were 21, I was 27. And but you knew what you wanted, and I think you wanted to know, is this guy play it? Or is he serious?
it's true.
Fast forward a story of like a year and a half later, 3 breakups later by Katie.
Well,
She set boundaries, and I loved it. That's what I loved about you, is I think men do want to have boundaries set. You ready for this one? Here's your hook. Men are like dogs, and women are like cats. And if you train your dog right, you'll have a good dog. If you don't start the training early and set the correct boundaries, you're going to have just a yapping dog that just, you can't control. But a dog wants to be able to know what his owner wants. A dog wants to know how to play fetch. He wants to know the game because he wants to perform well. And if you let them know, all right, here we go. I have this ball. You go. When I throw it, you catch it, bring it back, you get a treat, and that works. Perfect. You don't get the treat one time. Now he's going to be like, hey, are we playing the game or are we not playing the game? Another time, are we not playing the game? Now, if you train the dog right, you're not going to always have to have the treats. If you keep playing fetch and he feels like he's been a good boy and comes back, brings you the ball, and the owner's happy. But if the owner starts getting distracted and the dog brings back the ball and the owner's over there talking, over there texting, over there doing his thing, dog's going to get tired. So anyway, might have been a little long, but
I like the dog analogy.
Tangent.
Well, yeah, no, it was just you needed fine tuning is what it was.
So, question then. I think a lot of girls want to know, like, how do you know if a guy just requires fine tuning or it's really red flags and you need to back away?
Well, if they don't change.
Ooh. Dang, that was quick.
So, for
So, what do you mean?
Would you like to use our examples? Or?
Yeah, for sure. So, the question is, how do you know when something needs to just have boundaries or when something's a red flag and you should walk away? And Katie said, if they change.
And this is anything. It could be in dating. This is
Business.
friendships, business, whatever
Business
it
partners.
is.
Yeah.
You have to draw your line of what you're wanting and what you're willing to sacrifice and like to hold the bar for what's okay and what's not okay. And then, in our example, I wasn't okay with some of the things you're doing. So then I said, well, no, we're done.
Well, to be clear, I thought cheating was if you physically, kissed somebody or did things like that with somebody. I didn't think there was anything that was emotional cheating. I actually thought it was being nice to people. And I thought it's okay to, be nice and make people feel good about themselves. Or feel good about myself because they would, laugh and reciprocate that. So I thought, hey, as long as something physically doesn't happen, it's okay. And so, I was maybe a little more bubbly, flirty. And Katie was like, no. And I actually thought, dude, you are being way too strict and way too
So so at this point, we're officially dating. And you've also had in your defense years of essentially being like, so who's the person I'm going to marry? And so you have to clearly test the field out. You got to date a lot of girls. You got to naturally, I think also, not I think, but like men, women, we feel good when we get attention from that opposite sex or gender that, we're attracted to. And when we get that, it's validation of ourselves. So you are already in that pattern of doing it for how long? But then when I'm like, no, if we're together, we're giving our attention, our time, all of that in the investment of one another to see if this is what we want to do as an end goal of marriage. But if you're over here like, the butterfly chaser that you were at the time, saying, oh, well, but what about over here? This feels good to talk and get this validation. It's like, no, that we're either loyal to each other or we're not.
And I thought that was being loyal, joking and flirting with somebody at, a grocery store or online with Facebook at that time. It was kind of fresh and new and everybody's all in one area that, you see, but you don't get to talk to. And all of a sudden they, now slide into your DM and we didn't know that's what that was, but, that was all good,
Yeah, but it wasn't.
So then Katie told me it wasn't. And I was like, well, why not? And this was a really good story, actually.
The soup.
The soup.
The soup.
The soup.
So, the soup story. So you came back, or you went out.
So I went to Idaho.
Yeah.
Idaho
Falls.
Idaho Falls. I went down to
An hour drive.
30 minutes. I went 30 minutes down because a buddy of mine who I really looked up to was like, he told me.
He was kind of like a mentor, so he's a little older.
He told me, he's like, hey, I've got this this girl for you that I want to introduce, that she's my wife's cousin. And already the fact that it was the mentor wanting me to see the girl was like, I owed it to him to show up for him.
No, we were dating.
Not weird.
We were officially dating.
But I was like, well, how do I not know that this is maybe how it ends up turning out? I'm dating somebody and then I met somebody and then they're like, So anyway, I was just not secure with marriage. Marriage was I'd already had so many friends that by that time had either not a couple of divorces, but a couple of different people who had divorces or things happen. And I was just like, marriage is like such a long time to be with the wrong person that I was very self-conscious about, like, what if it doesn't work out? What if the female changes, after marriage? And I'd seen that. So anyway,
marriage, kid.
Or I just really like flirting, whatever. Let's just call it how it is. So anyway, he calls me. He's like, come to Idaho Falls, meet this girl. I'm like, all right, cool. So I drive down. I hang out with them anyway. And then the craziest part, and this like never happens to me. These are like little cool things that end up. I like got sick out of nowhere. Not like I don't really get sick out of nowhere. I like had to pull over and throw up, and I like never throw up. And it was like out of nowhere. I'm like, what is happening? So ended up being like really bad to the point that I could barely even drive back. But I was like, the first thought was I gotta get to Katie.
Huh.
So as I'm like trying to meet another girl for funsies.
I'm glad we can laugh about it now. It's not laughing matters.
This is a secure situation.
We're safe though.
For funsies, I'm like driving back a half hour, like pale as can be.
I need you, I'm sick.
I'm like, Katie.
Yo, baby, come over.
Little does she know, like, what had happened. Nothing physical, but still, right? In my mind, these are my mind, is what I'm saying. So I drive back, I go to her, and she like, I'll take care of you, obviously, right away, right? So here I am not realizing that I've got like a nurturer and that I should like, I just took advantage of it in the sense of like, I didn't see it for what it was. I just thought like, oh yeah, of course she's being nice. When really now that I look back, I'm like, no, what an attribute to have somebody who is nurturing and caring when, easily somebody else could have been like, I got homework or stuff to do. Anyway, so I ended up falling asleep.
Well, I got you Gatorade, soup, little saltine crackers. And then I'm like, go lay down, go to sleep. And
and I passed out. Like I was just like gone. I was gone. And then what happens is I get...
No. You first tell me that you have an appointment or someone that you're supposed to talk with. And you're like, can you text them for me? And I was like, yeah, for sure. Like, who is it? And then like I go scroll for their name.
So I think I fell asleep. I told you, oh yeah, I've got to get this. And can you do it? And I like fell asleep and passed out.
Yeah.
And then I get woken up with some soup in a bowl, in a Tupperware with a lid. And she says, you got to go. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, wake up, you got to go. I'm like, huh? She goes, no, with a smile. You got to go now. You got to go. Here's a Tupperware soup. It's time to go. And I'm like, huh? And I'm like still groggy. And she's like being so nice. So that's why it's not resonating. I'm like, huh? And she's walking me out of her door, like out of her house.
I already placed the soup, the Gatorade, all of that. And I was like, peace out.
She's like, you got to go. I'm like, why? And what did you say? You said? I
was like, it's time to go. I think you'll figure it out in your text.
Yeah, that's what she said. I think you'll figure it out in the text.
And then he's like, didn't say anything.
And I'm in my car, it hit me, and I got the soup.
But you didn't say anything. You just got in your car. You're like, oh, shoot. I got in.
Boundaries. She set the boundary. First, she knew what her boundaries were, what her intentions were, what she's all about, and her own personal commandments of what she's cool with and not cool with.
No.
And that, you had to have set that up prior in your life in order to have the confidence of, wow, this is somebody I'm dating. This is somebody I care about. This is somebody I love. But it doesn't matter. He went out of bounds.
Yeah. And there's also a difference too. Like, there's other ways to handle it. It's like you could either start crying. And no, there's no right way to handle it. But it's either like I could start crying about it because you're sad, obviously. Or you can start throwing the soup on the person sleeping. Or you can start screaming. But there was a level being like, no, like he's not going to take, this is something that you chose to do and actually has nothing to do with me. So, but because of that, you're going to face your own consequences. And now you don't have me. And in that sense alone is enough of a consequence for you to be like, because if I then started going crazy and throwing soup at you and this and that, you'd be like, oh, okay, like she's crazy. Oh,
Now
she's
it,
crazy. So
yeah.
it validates, oh, okay, so maybe I did make the right decision because she is crazy. And I'm not worried about looking crazy or not, but it was more so being like, no, like he's not going to take my
I'm
self-dignity.
not gonna take your power. Yeah, your
Exactly.
self-dignity. Yeah.
And like you can walk yourself out, go take care of yourself because you just lost
But this is what
this.
you're missing out on.
Yeah. And then I think that was more impactful in the moment
Oh yeah.
of being like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry for your loss. You can go now.
And for her to be like, you were out of bounds, she didn't have to say that. Is the actions. And I think that's a huge takeaway, like we've been talking about in dating, is before you get into a relationship, know what you're all about. Know what you're not about and set those boundaries. Because I don't think you knew, okay, if somebody does this to me, I'm going to send them away. But you knew, hey, the ball went out of bounds. He took it out of bounds. Here you go. And he's not going to take my power.
And even like, I could see my, you just thinking like, well, why would you still give him the soup? Like, why would you still put the gator in there? And it's literally to be like, he's gonna go home, he's gonna go sit at his table by himself, and he's gonna be eating that soup and being like, dang, like she made this soup and now I'm eating it by myself. Like,
dang, this tastes good. She can make some good food.
but like, here you go. Like, this is your last gift in a sense of like what you have left of me.
Yeah.
Like, go think of me by yourself, So there's more power to that than a lot of people be like, how did you, not lose it, throw the soup? But
yeah.
I mean, I was sad.
So,
But
so while I was sleeping,
Hmm.
a text came in, and that's how you figured it out, right?
Yeah, the text came in that sounded like a typical text. And then I also was very secure and I'm not at all a message browser, like going through messages browsing because I was fine. And
I think it's okay to be. At that time, I wasn't actually, and I think that's part of the red flag to potentially acknowledge. And some people might get really upset. So leave it in the comments and tell me how upset you are. But then think about it yourself and tell me, is there a reason why? I would hate, and I don't use hate often, if anybody had opened up my phone. But a lot of the
no,
reason
you were
was,
uncomfortable if I held your phone
oh,
to like navigate the way we're going on the road, and I would be, and I didn't think much of it. I was just more like, oh, like that's his issue if he has something going on in the past, obviously, of what that is, and that stinks that he can't feel just open and just like he has something so little to have to worry about and be stressed out about.
yeah, but the space that I was in, I had myself convinced, dude, this is my property. Like, this is my, like, not just property, actually. This is my, like, personal diary almost.
Well, it's like the level of vulnerability.
I felt like you would be crazy for wanting to go through my diary, not because I felt like, oh, I had stuff to hide, even though I knew that's what it was.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, like, at that time, I had myself convinced, not, oh, I don't want to find my stuff. It was actually convinced that, why would you do such a thing? Like, this is my thing. Almost like when you first go into somebody's house, you're not going to walk in and start opening the fridge without them asking or something like that. Something where it's like, hey, no, this is like, not because I'm hiding something. I think that's what I'm saying to the people that are in the comments. Are like, no, my phone is my phone. If you really take a look at it, there's more there. And what the more there was, knowing that there's stuff that I wouldn't want you to see. And I was so uncomfortable. And so I think that was or should be a red flag, even though that's super controversial. Where now my most favorite thing genuinely, when you experience freedom, is that like, whatever, like, I have my phone, take it. Like, there's nothing to worry about. Look through it. Like, we have business things together, so she does. And so, like, that's a beautiful place to be in. Coming from a guy who was like, right now, don't shoot, somebody got a text, somebody got something, you know what I mean? Like, so to be at peace actually is a freedom for yourself versus a concern of, what do I need to hide or not? And that goes back to your layers. Like, what's your core and what are your, 5 or 6 values of priority after that, Like, for me, it's God, my wife, my kids, work, church. And with my kids, there's family. That whole thing's family, extended family, everything else. And then there's work and church and those other things. Some people might even say, why is work ahead of church? And it's just the needing to provide, but God is my center. So that actually comes before. But when I say church, those are like church callings and other things like that, where I know if I got to make a decision between the two, where it lies. And now sometimes they interchange, but I think it's understanding, okay, where do priorities lie so that when two good things come about, you understand what the decision is going to be made before it's having to be made.
Yeah. I think it's a level of vulnerability, communication, open communication. Like there could still be like vulnerability in the sense of depending on who you talk with, people, not you, just in general, people can also have different tones, have different conversations, have different, where a lot of times people will go into their phone, their spouse's phone, and then now start analyzing and be like, well, why did you reply like this? Why did you use this emoji? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
So I can see also why people want to close off and not be fully open with that. So it takes two people though to be open, and maybe that is an issue. No, I don't want to. If someone's like, I don't want you to send a wink face to another woman. Like, I feel that's inappropriate.
But the guy's like, no, it has nothing to do with it. So it's a fear of interpretation.
Right.
That then is.
But then the guy doesn't change or not change. It's more so be open to see that perspective. And then she's not open to necessarily hear.
Because her
that's not how I feel.
Being tapped, that button.
So then they now defend for themselves versus defending for the relationship and being like,
you need to say that again.
We often choose to defend for ourselves and our own beliefs versus being like, hey, like what's best, and to defend and fight for the relationship.
Correct.
So our pride gets in the way. And that's what I mean. What I was saying earlier is like, well, if they change. So at that point, you are then open for me to be like, hey, I think, in a relationship, you should be able to look through my phone. You can read any text and conversation with my mom, dad, friends, whoever it may be, because that's who I am and I'm full open. There's nothing to hide. And if there is something that I feel that I need to hide, then that's telling for the relationship of I may not trust you with certain info, or I may not be fully being honest and open and vulnerable with you. And there is some kind of like hidden stuff. Because
that's what you end up doing in marriage anyway, is the ultimate vulnerability, the ultimate trust, and the ultimate growth together. And how do you get there is together. And people have different relationships where we've committed to say, hey, we're all in on everything. Finances, relationships, friendships, and all of that kind of stuff. We've protected that because of a quote that I love that you actually brought into our relationship by a guy named Gordon B. Hinckley. And I love it.
What?
The zero Q.
What is it?
The zero Q.
No, what is it?
You say it. Oh, you're testing me. Be fiercely loyal.
Yeah.
And
in all things.
Be fiercely loyal in all things. And I love the fierce part. Because you don't really hear that word often with that. And being fiercely loyal. And that's what we try to hold our standard. And not that it's perfect, but I'm just saying you brought these levels into this relationship that I was never taught. And what I think was beautiful is you held boundaries, but you didn't punish me for not having had those boundaries taught to me prior to meeting you, right? So what was taught to me and what I know is what I know from my prior experiences. You have different experiences that you brought in. Now you created boundaries, which I think is beautiful and I love. And you allowed for grace, but the difference between like what we started saying is, how do you know the difference between a red flag and run and a boundary that needs to be set? And you said it was change. And so you set the boundary, kicked me out, gave me some soup, and you let me go. And then you had allowed me to talk about it later on, maybe not that day, I remember. But later on, once I sat with it, and we sat with it, we were able to talk about it, explain it, and you were able to tell me, This is the rule. This is the boundary. This is why. Then we had a long, drawn-out conversation that ended up lasting all night in a car, and we drained ourselves. But then at the end of it, we looked at each other and we're like, is this what we want to fight? Because I would fight saying like, no, this is not cool. You shouldn't have to have access to my phone, especially when we're not even married. I shouldn't have to not be able to, joke or be kind to each other and be able to, or kind to other people, and you would think that it's flirty. And we actually broke down and realized, okay, is what we want us, and if so, these are the boundaries. And that was breakup number one. Was I had to realize, do I accept these boundaries? And I said yes. I'll live within these boundaries.
Except when I don't.
Stay tuned for breakup number 2 in the next episode of what's podcast?
More than dope.
More than dope. Peace out.